Okay, let's dive into something that I think we've all wondered about at some point. Why do people just vanish? No big fight, no dramatic exit. They just disappear from our lives. It's a real mystery, and today we're going to unpack the psychology behind it. I mean, think about it for a second. Have you ever had a friend whose texts just stop getting answered? Or that coworker who's suddenly ghosting the group chat? One day they're part of everything, and the next, poof, they've pulled back from everyone. We're going to get into the real reasons why this happens. Our first reaction is almost always to judge, right? We think, wow, they're so cold, or that's really arrogant, or even they must be unstable. But what if that's not the whole story? What if we're missing the point completely? The thing is, psychology tells us something different. That coldness, it's probably a form of protection. That arrogance, it might actually be a desperate need for relief. And instability, well, that could just be the messy, chaotic look of real personal growth. And here's the absolute key to understanding this whole disappearing act, it is not random. Think of it like the brain pulling the emergency brake. When all that social and emotional pressure builds up and becomes just overwhelming, the brain flips a switch. It goes into protection mode. And what's the fastest way to drop all that pressure? Creating distance. So, what we found is that psychology points to 6 main reasons for this, 6 key drivers behind this behavior. And honestly, I think you're going to find them pretty fascinating. So let's get into it and unpack them one by one. All right, our first 2 reasons. They're both rooted in one really powerful idea, the overloaded brain. This is that tipping point where connection stops feeling good, where it stops giving you energy and starts feeling like pure exhaustion. So first up, we've got what's called psychological overload. A great way to think about it is like an electrical circuit. Your brain can only handle so much voltage, right? And when you're dealing with constant arguments or nonstop criticism, or you're carrying the emotional weight of everyone around you, eventually that circuit is just going to blow. It's not about being tired. It's a total system failure, a deep, deep mental exhaustion. And this is such a crucial way to reframe the whole experience. Because from the outside, yeah, it looks like they're isolating themselves. But from their perspective, for the person who's actually going through it, stepping away feels like finally coming up for air after being held underwater. It's not about being lonely, it's about pure, unadulterated relief. The second reason, which kind of goes hand in hand with this, is a very specific type of overload. We're talking about support system burnout. You know who this happens to? The strong friend, the one who's everyone's rock, their emotional anchor. They're the listener, the problem solver, and they just keep absorbing everyone else's issues until, well, the weight is just too much to carry. And right here is where something really critical happens inside the brain. It literally starts to rewire itself. The people they love, their friends, their family, they stop being a sign of connection, and instead they become a trigger for stress. At that point, disappearing isn't really a choice. It's a survival instinct kicking in to stop a complete internal collapse. Okay, so let's move on to the next couple of reasons. These are a little different because they're all about drawing a new line in the sand. It's about a search for something more real, more authentic. You could almost say it's shifting from playing defense to playing offense. So, number 3 is what you could call a boundary awakening. This is for the people pleaser, the one who spent their whole life being way too accommodating, ignoring red flags, giving people chance after chance. And this isn't some slow, gradual change. It's a snap, a breaking point. And when they finally wake up to it, they don't just put up a few boundaries. They build a fortress. And reason number 4 is high social sensitivity. Now, it's super important to know this is not the same as being shy. It's actually a neurological thing. For some people, their brains process social information like body language, tone of voice, all of it, so intensely that it just burns through their energy like crazy. So a party that might feel totally energizing for you or me, for them, it can be completely draining. They absolutely need that time alone afterward just to recharge. So what happens is when the social scene just gets to be too much, they pull back. They retreat to kind of recalibrate. But they're not avoiding people because they're lonely. No, they're looking for connections that are actually deeper, that have more substance. It's a very conscious choice, quality over quantity. All right, our last 2 reasons, these go even deeper. We're going to look at how our past shapes our survival instincts and how a vision for our future can actually push us to completely reinvent who we are. Reason number 5 is something called survival independence. This is a pattern that often gets wired in during childhood, especially if emotional support wasn't always there. It was inconsistent. The lesson they learn deep down is when things get tough, I'm on my own. So as adults, when they're hurting, their gut instinct is to pull away. It's not that they don't want help, it's that they've been trained their whole lives not to even expect it. But this leads to a really important question. See, those same coping skills that helped you survive, they can actually start holding you back. They become barriers to really growing as a person. So, what happens when just surviving isn't enough anymore? And that brings us to our final reason, number 6, identity reconstruction. This is when people pull away because they are actively trying to reinvent themselves. Maybe some big life event happens and it just clicks. Their old life, their old friends, their old self, none of it fits anymore. So they create that distance to give themselves the room, the mental space, to figure out who they are now and build that new identity, basically from the ground up. So what's the big takeaway here? What's the common thread that runs through all 6 of these reasons? It really boils down to a fundamental shift in what a person values. It's them making a conscious choice for peace over performance. And look, if any of this is hitting home for you, if you are one of those people who has disappeared to find your peace, I really want you to hear this. You are not broken, you're not cold, and you are definitely not a bad person. What you're doing is actually a sign of something incredibly important, a deep need for reflection, for balance, for your own independence. You've just decided to stop performing for everyone else and start prioritizing your own peace. And you know what? That is an incredibly brave thing to do. So I'll leave you with one final thought to chew on. Now that you see these patterns, now that you understand the real reasons someone might just vanish, who are you going to stop blaming? The person who disappeared? Or maybe it's time to stop blaming yourself.